Big Daddy Government knows what's best for you, so sit down with us and take your medicine. I'm Jacob.
And I'm Sadie.
And yeah, we've got a lot of craziness going on right now, what with the Omicron variant and everything. I believe it's being called.
Omnicorp. Some people call it Omnicorp.
Omicron.
I thought it was Omicron when I first read it because Omicron is not a word that I've ever heard spoken before.
Well, yeah, it's them Greeks. They're still plaguing us to this day with their BS.
Gotcha.
So maybe it's appropriate then to open with President Joe Biden's greetings to us unvaccinated. Let's go ahead and open this one. So this is from the official whitehouse.gov here. And what it says here is essentially, so the first paragraph says, our vaccines work against Omicron, especially for people who get booster shots when they are eligible. And then the next paragraph says, we are intent on not letting Omicron disrupt work and school for the vaccinated. You've done the right thing and we'll get through this. For the unvaccinated, you are looking at a winter of severe illness and death for yourselves, your families, and the hospitals you may soon overwhelm.
Yeah, I mean, they're just not even trying to hide the division anymore. But, you can't disrupt school for the unvaccinated and not disrupt it for the vaccinated. So
right.
That first thing, I don't really understand how that's possible. And also, why are you wishing death on people?
Yeah,
we said this last week, but everyone we know is either sick right now or was sick within the last month. So illness is a thing. It's winter.
Yeah.
Yesterday was the first day of winter. Sickness is always is major and increased in the winter. But it wasn't severe.
Yeah, I mean,
nobody died. I don't know anybody who died.
I had COVID and I lost my sense of taste and smell for 3 days, and I had a sore throat. And the sore throat was the most annoying part because, to have something hurt every time you swallow is the absolute worst. But the funny thing about this White House Gov little bulletin here that I think is hilarious is
so ominous.
It strikes me as a White House intern who really wanted to be a writer, like a fantasy writer, and they got stuck working for Joseph Biden instead.
They go to their shitty studio apartment at the end of the day and play Magic the Gathering, and this is the shit that they wrote. Yeah.
Yeah, they're just trying to. Maybe they're in college still. Maybe they're just trying to get by. Maybe they just got stuck at the bottom doing the dirty work. Yeah.
I mean, it evokes emotions of a nuclear winter. You will have severe illness and death. It's okay.
Yeah,
you are patient zero. It's
this is 100, and this is coming right off the back of new data showing that Omicron is basically 40 times less deadly or something like that.
That just shows you how out of touch our Lord and Savior Biden is from the rest of the country. He just reads whatever's handed to him and goes in front of people and makes it sound scary, but he obviously hasn't read the data. Nobody's briefed him on it because he's still trying to push this, and he obviously, I mean, he had a televised, what do you call it?
Address.
Thank you. A televised address where he said basically the same thing as what is written here, and he meant it with all of his being. So he's way out of touch with the rest of the world, or he's just okay with pushing the narrative that's handed to him.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think, it's just as simple as they're running out of excuses why this pandemic is continuing to quote unquote rage out of control. Now, it's only out of control if you believe that you can control it for the first place, or believe that it's actually worthy of being controlled. At this point, it's really a manageable disease. We have a number of therapies available, including the vaccines. So it's what? I don't understand why the government feels the need to still be involved in this. To me, it should just be a hands-off
grab.
Yeah, but talking logically, I know we're talking about the government, but if we're talking about logic, this should just be hands off at this point. We tried, throw your hands up and say, go get the vaccines if you want, but otherwise we can't really do anything about this.
Yeah, I feel like if most of America about a year ago had just said, yeah, we're not doing this anymore. We're gonna go shopping. We're gonna not wear our masks. We're just gonna do whatever. This all would have been over, but people are just willing to go along with it, and it's perpetuated this, and the government's like, well, maybe we can keep doing it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's obviously it's gone way out of control for quite a while. So anyway,
Yeah,
shall we play a game?
we can play a game.
Okay, this game that I just invented today is called Guess Where That Headline's Going. And so let me throw this headline up on the screen here. So here's the headline. I'm going to ask you to read this headline
Sure.
and guess where this is going. So for the people listening, this headline is from the New York Times. It's a guest essay. It says...
It's an opinion piece.
It's an opinion piece. Thank you.
It says, facts alone aren't going to win over the unvaccinated, period. This might, period.
Okay, so Sadie, the game is I want you to tell me where do you think this article's going?
I'm guessing it's probably not going to appeal to emotions because these opinion pieces tend to conflate facts and emotional appeals. I'm gonna say it's probably going to threaten the unvaccinated, like their money or their houses or something.
I think we have a bingo.
Ooh, ding, 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 ding.
So I'm going to pull up, just for some context, so I'm going to pull up this here. So this is the author bio. This is from a physician, Anupam. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Anupam Jena. This doctor is an economist, a physician, and an associate professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School. So we already know that this is going to be an issue.
Oh,
so
boy.
this is the type of people that we're dealing with, right? The big smarty people who are so intelligent, so all-knowing that they can write op-eds in the New York Times and tell us all how we have to live our lives.
I really don't like that this first doctor is an economist and a physician because it's like, how many cookie jars do you have your hands in there, friend?
Right. Well, yeah, it's kind of like, how can we extract as much money as possible from the sick people or
Right.
from the not sick people in our case?
Let's make them sick first.
Right. So this is another portion of the article that I think is relevant. It says here, what interventions might work? So this is the author writing this. Behavioral science research suggests that one of the best ways to motivate behavior is through incentives, either positive or negative. Incentives work because they do not force people to change their beliefs. So maybe there's not...
Wait a second. Can incentives be negative? Wouldn't that be called a punishment?
Ooh, well, I mean, if you're in an Orwellian hellhole... It's a negative incentive, Sadie. It's not a punishment.
It's double speak.
Right.
But okay, I mean, I guess that's not false saying incentives work because they don't force people to change their beliefs, but you're asking them to outwardly lie
Right.
and fake something, and you are asking them to create inner turmoil in themselves. Because you're like, well, you don't agree with this negative incentive, and you don't agree with this idea or this mandate, which is probably where this is going, that they want to impose. And that's okay. You can still have the belief that it's wrong and whatever, but we're still going to make you do it. It's
Yeah.
like, that's just trash.
And I'm even highly suspicious of that conclusion. They're saying behavioral science research, it basically says that we studied it and incentives work. It's like, no shit. Like, you needed a whole study. But then it comes to the conclusion that they work because people don't have to change their beliefs. I don't even know if that's a correct conclusion.
No,
If
I
you're
don't think
changing
so.
your behavior because of an incentive, there may be some cases where you change your beliefs about it.
Well, I think if the incentives are working, then maybe you didn't hold that belief very firmly to begin with.
Right.
And so you were already kind of wishy-washy. And so, I don't know. I guess you are changing your belief, but maybe they don't see it as a change because you weren't very steadfast in it to begin with.
Right.
You weren't combative about it enough. So they're like, well, it's not really changing your belief because you didn't fight us on it. So
Right.
I guess it's not really your belief.
Yeah, and it's like, and there's an
It's just
argument to be
ridiculous.
made too. Like, belief is not just something that you think, it's something that you act out in the world, right? And so if you're actively changing your behavior in response to an incentive, you could make an argument philosophically that that is a change of belief.
Well, it's interesting that they use the word belief too, because that is a word used to describe trusting in an idea that you can't prove. Like belief, like believing in God or believing in Santa Claus or something like that. It's trusting and putting faith in an entity or an institution or an ideology that you can't prove and you can't back up. It's not necessarily based in fact, but you hold that belief because you know that even if you can't prove it, it exists, or that's what people will say.
Right.
So incentives working because people don't have to change their beliefs. It's like having an opinion that you've come to the conclusion on or you hold because of facts is not a belief. That's your informed opinion.
That's your interpretation of reality.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that they would use this word belief almost to devalue people who actually take in facts and come to their own conclusions, because they're kind of trying to make it like this esoteric metaphysical thing where it's like, well, a belief, you can have it, but you can't prove it.
Yeah.
But an opinion that's factually based, you can prove, and they don't.
Right.
They want to downplay those people.
Or maybe not necessarily prove, but just be able to argue intelligently. Like
you can show evidence for your case.
Right. Like, so you have scientists that argue facts all the time, and there's a lot of disputed science out there. Would you call that a belief, or would you just call that a reasoned argument? Right? Like, does a scientist believe that something is true given all the facts, or do they know it's true and try to convince everybody else?
Well, and they also have hypotheses that they test all the time. And so they'll say, well, I came to my conclusion because of these tests and these studies that I was doing, or because of tests and studies that other people have done. And yeah, you're going to have arguments on either side of it, but they both technically have facts to back it up. Even if they aren't tried and true facts, it's still factual because it was published in a study.
Yeah.
So it's a little different, I think.
So, so skepticism of their conclusion here that people can change their behavior without changing their beliefs.
Yeah, I don't think that's possible.
So then it finally culminates into exactly what you guessed, which is this. The incentive that seems to work especially well is the employer vaccine mandate, a negative incentive, aka a punishment.
Right.
And then it says in scare quotes, get vaccinated or get fired has shown to be an effective message.
Yeah.
So here you have somebody representing the public health establishment who is trying to dress up the idea that you can force people to do shit you want if you point a gun at them. They're just trying to dress up the idea that this is a negative incentive, that this is just playing with human behavior and incentives. This is so damn evil. Yeah,
it is evil because this is a behavioral or a physician using behavioral research, and the behavioral research will tell you it's incentive/reward or it's punishment. So that the fact that they're using these tricky terms and saying a negative incentive is somehow making it sound better. Like incentive has a positive connotation because it is a reward. It's a reward word. So the fact that they aren't even saying what it is, which is a punishment, is really tricky.
Yeah,
like they know exactly what they're doing and the exact tone that they're trying to portray.
Yeah. Well, this is the excesses of science, in my opinion. Like this is literally in the New York Times, an opinion piece, literally just rationalizing away some abhorrent behavior or rationalizing some massive government power under the guise of science and facts and the redefinition of basic words. And it's not even using any compelling scientific studies. Like you take a random person off the street and you say, hey, do this or I'm going to do something bad to you. You could just say, well, I'm just forcing that person to choose a negative incentive. I'm just providing a negative incentive.
Technically, there's always a choice, right? It's like these videos you're seeing of people in New York walking up to strangers with a gun pointed at them and they just hand over whatever's on them. Yeah. Because they're like, well, take my things, better than getting shot. They still technically have a choice, though. I mean, they could have attacked their aggressor, or they could have could have gotten shot, but
Right.
it's not really an option because you don't want to get shot.
And I guarantee you these dumbass scientists would come up with a paper that said, oh, yeah, that's the smart decision to do in that. You know, the criminal just provided a negative incentive, and human behavior says that it's the smartest thing to do to give your wallet. Yeah, no shit. We don't
Fight or flight self-preservation, of course.
We don't need scientific studies to reveal these basic truths. We don't need it.
Oh, you mean people are always inclined to self-preservation? That's interesting. We didn't know that for 100 years or more, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely absurd.
It is evil because they're trying to make it seem so flippant too, like, oh, you know, get vaccinated to get fired. It's really effective. We might as well implement it. It's no big deal.
Yeah, and they put
They'll comply. They'll comply. It's no big deal.
They put it in quotes like it's some widely used slogan.
Yeah.
I mean, this is literally Orwellian. Get vaccinated or get fired.
Behind that quote should just say Biden-Harris 2020. But
yeah, true. True. That's their re-election slogan.
Yeah.
If they make it. So
it's just cruel.
I think this dovetails nicely into this next story here. So this is from the National Pulse, and this is, so let me just bump this up. So this is essentially a story. The headline says, you want to read the headline?
The headline says, New York legislation provides for indefinite detention of unvaccinated at governor's whim.
Yep. So that headline is obviously very shocking because this is a very shocking article. But here's the thing about this. So the legislation is proposed. So the next legislative session beginning January 5th, 2022, the New York Senate and Assembly could vote on a bill that would grant permissions to remove and detain cases, contacts, carriers, or anyone suspected of presenting a, quote, significant threat to public health, end quote, and remove them from public life on an indefinite basis.
Oh, that just sent a chill down my spine. This is exactly what's happening in Australia.
Yeah.
This is the exact measures and qualifications for people who are being sent to the gulag. In Australia, you don't have to be presenting with any symptoms. You don't even have to have left your house, and they will come knock on your door and say, come with us. You are going to be indefinitely quarantined because we suspect that you were exposed to somebody who is highly infectious. Even if they've never left their house, even, you know, in a month or whatever, even if they haven't had anybody over, they'll just come. And then there's one video of a guy who goes, well, I hope it's a mistake. Well, we'll get it sorted out. And nobody's heard anything from him since. He's probably still there.
Yeah.
This is terrifying. And also the quarantine sign just looks like it's straight up out of a zombie apocalypse sci-fi film.
Yeah,
it's
that's
terrifying.
True.
Like, it doesn't even look real. It looks like it's photoshopped. It looks like it's a movie prop, but this is real, and it's honestly probably a sign from the Australia quarantine.
Yeah, it could
camps,
be.
But
it could be. Yeah, I mean,
this is scary.
So this is proposed legislation, but in a sense, it doesn't matter. The fact that a representative of United States citizens at the state level, federal level, whatever, would think for a moment that it's appropriate for the government to detain people for nebulous reasons without due process is 100% absolutely disqualifying. It has to be. The fact that this was proposed shows such a great disdain for the basic liberties that we have in this nation. I mean, one of the basic liberties is just being protected from the government. Right. Not having the government able to just run roughshod over you for no reason. Now, we haven't been super successful in that, but we shouldn't stop trying.
Well,
right?
And a lot of our amendment rights are exactly to protect us from the bodies which govern us.
Exactly.
They are put into our Constitution as amendments to protect the citizens of the nation, not the governmental bodies of the nation. They're given to us to bolster us and help us out. And you said any government official who's representing people, but I don't think they think of themselves as representing people anymore. They don't ever consider their constituencies. They just think of, how can I get more power and how can I express it, and how can I show the people that I can do what I want. They don't see themselves as being employed by citizens, and they don't see themselves as actually representing the people of their city or their state or their region. And it's very obvious.
Well, and the problem again with like this single party rule, and I don't really care if it's if a Republican or Democrat single party rule, is like eventually these people are going to get so comfortable in their positions, they're going to be so sure that they're just going to win re-election because either no one shows up or people just vote Democrat or Republican down the ticket. So like these people no one's going to face any repercussions in New York State for proposing this. The person who proposed it, the people who wrote it, they're just going to get voted in. They're just going to get reelected because it's going to be a down ballot vote. The blue people are just going to vote for more blue people.
Right.
And it's, but the thing about this is, so this paragraph says, this bill gives the governor of New York, his or her delegates, including but not limited to the commissioner and heads of local health departments, the right to remove and detain any individuals or groups of people through issuing a single order. So, so the governor is going to be able to detain people without due process, under any reasonable suspicion of being a danger to public health, and not just individuals, but groups of people.
What do you think they mean by groups? Do you think they mean like families that live in the same household or entire apartment buildings? Or do you think they mean like based on class or based on race?
Well, I think you know how they shut down churches, and some churches, some synagogues held services anyway. There you go. Remove the whole synagogue. Remove the whole service.
Just because you all could have been exposed to this one person.
Everyone who was here was presenting. No, it's not even that. It doesn't even have to be exposed. It's presenting a public health risk. If you shut down the ability of people to congregate in public, and people congregate in public anyway, you can say, hey, you are presenting a public health risk, and you are a group of people, so I'm going to round you all up and ship you off to the quarantine camps.
Can you imagine if we did this to people with like sickle cell anemia or HIV? It's like, you're presenting a danger to public health just by having these blood diseases, aren't you?
Well, is sickle cell anemia contagious? I don't think so, but HIV is a good example.
Well, sickle cell anemia is passed from mother to child, so you can make the claim that they're a public health, quote, public health potential risk, because if someone were to get pregnant or a man were to get a woman pregnant and they have sickle cell anemia, they could have a baby who is deformed
right
in their blood.
Well, that's a good point. It's like, if we're just going to be super broad about people presenting a public health danger, like you're going to have, like, I understand the government has to have some capabilities with regards to maintaining the public health, but we've crossed the line of where the government should be participating in that long ago. And the question is, if we're going to let vague laws like this even be proposed, then you could potentially end up in the future in a policy which catches up people who are at risk of having, let's say, a quote-unquote unhealthy child, and then and then allowing the government to have power to say, well, we're going to sterilize you. Like, obviously, that's way down the road if this continues.
Well, but
I
mean,
we have to talk seriously about the broadness of public health danger.
Well, and I hate to make this comparison because everybody brings this comparison, but it's like, are we about to start putting Star of David's on windows and writing Judah on windows of shopkeepers? I mean, I hate to make this comparison, but Hitler literally thought the Jews were a parasite on the planet.
Right.
That would be considered a public health crisis, right?
And he was the quote-unquote governor.
Right. He vehemently believed that they actually were a sickness or had sicknesses that were going to make his Aryan race impure. Not that that's right. It is not, that's obviously not right, but this is basically the same thing, but in different words. They're not isolating people based on one specific religion or creed or race or anything, but they're just saying, well, if we think you're dirty and diseased, we're going to take you away. And it can be anybody, but it's still not the government's job to tell people that they're invalid or diseased.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of people, like, they're sick of hearing about the Jews in Nazi Germany comparison, but it's like, what? It's the clearest example we have of the othering of some group of people,
right?
Initially for public health reasons, that were then, horrible things were done to them.
Right.
They and this ties into the larger, trend of the government and the Biden administration specifically blaming the unvaccinated for everything.
Right.
Like, we're the scapegoat for literally everything that goes wrong in this pandemic.
The economy.
It's the economy.
The schools.
It's the fact that mutations are continuing to occur.
The hospitals.
Right.
Being, quote, overwhelmed.
Right. And so it's like we have another instance where people are being othered on the basis of their health status or on the basis of being a quote unquote public health risk. What else are we supposed to compare it to?
Well, and I know people get upset about this comparison because it's like, you don't know history and the only thing you can compare authoritarianism to is Hitler's Germany. It's like, well, obviously not. There was Maoist China. There was the Soviet Union, which were both authoritarian states. There was imperialist Japan, which was an authoritarian state. But in those instances, the obvious othering wasn't so clear. Like, it wasn't so obvious in those other nations that people were being othered. It was mostly you were a political prisoner or a political opponent, but it wasn't because of your race or whatever. Not like this. This is, way more similar to Nazi Germany than Soviet Russia or Maoist China or imperialist Japan. And that's why everyone keeps using that example, because it is the clearest one for one, basically, of what's happening.
And that's not to say that we're going to end up the same as, obviously there's a lot of differences about our system compared to Nazi Germany, namely that we have relatively powerful governors that can actually protect us from the federal government. Any red state governor is a good example, but Ron DeSantis specifically. So if Ron DeSantis is there just to say, no, you're not going to other the unvaccinated, you're not going to put restrictions on the unvaccinated, then the problem basically stops there. Right. And then as long as people are still able to move to these places, like self-select out of the medical tyranny, then we'll be fine. We're not going to get to that point. But it's still, it is the clearest example. I don't know what else we're supposed to compare it to. Are we not supposed to reference history when something similar is happening? Just as a warning?
It's so overplayed. I don't want to hear about Hitler anymore. It's like, well, if you don't want to hear about Hitler anymore, then you are just for the erasure of history.
Yeah. Stop acting like him if you don't want to hear about him anymore.
Got him.
Oh, spicy. All right. So do you want to talk about Bree Newsom Bass?
Yeah. So Bree Newsom Bass, if you don't know, is a co-founder for BLM. And she is the co-founder that has been kind of exiled from the movement, from the organization, after it came out that she has not one, but 4 mansions in the United States. And everyone kind of went, is that where all of our money went that we donated to your cause? But she has come to Twitter in the last couple of days and decided that she was going to dip her hand into the COVID cookie jar again.
Oh, boy.
And so this tweet here says, quote, "You won't have serious illness," quote, kind of one of those fake quotes again, you know. And she says, "Is that supposed to be reassuring? Question mark. I'm vaccinated, boosted, and masked, and still not okay with the idea of losing my taste and smell or having chronic fatigue. I have a child too young to vaccinate. How did we arrive at simply accepting the spread of COVID?" Now, I get it. Being sick sucks. Like, you don't want to have fatigue. You don't want to lose your taste and smell. I still can't taste anything. I still can't smell anything. It's not fun. It's like, it's weird just eating food and experiencing temperature and texture and having no flavor to it at all. And it's weird when your coffee just tastes like hot water. Yeah. But it's not the end of the world. And you're trying to bring your child into this tweet and show that, try to play the emotional card, and everyone's going, kids are not going to get deathly ill from this. Kids are not even going to have that bad of symptoms. That's backed by data that is widely published. Yeah. So she's just trying to stir the pot. She's just trying to piss people off because she's the BLM co-founder, and that is her shtick. That's what she does. She stirs the pot and she pisses people off. Yeah. So I'm at the point where if somebody on Twitter brings up the danger to their child, like, there's the red flag that immediately dismissed.
You are terribly misinformed. Yes. Like, absolutely. There's only been, I don't want to say only, I mean, if you have a child who died as a result of COVID, that's a terrible loss.
Right.
But it's only in the grand scheme of things a couple hundred children. And to
Right.
my knowledge, as of this recording, no children have died from the Omicron variant.
No.
So it's like you're bringing up your child. You are literally using your child as a pawn for your fear mongering because,
Right.
or you're just too dumb to understand the data or even look at the data.
Well, and it's not even, I don't even think this tweet really speaks to her being afraid of it, because she's like, I'm just not okay with it. She's
Yeah.
not even like, I'm afraid for my life. Like, I'm going to be hospitalized, blah, 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 blah. She's just going, I don't want to get sick. Like,
Yeah.
she's being almost selfish about it, which I get it. Nobody wants to get sick, but talk to your immune system. I don't know. Take some vitamins, go for a walk, get some sunlight. I don't know what you want. Like,
Well, so
you're going to get sick.
So I think my opinion is that she's not okay with this because she, like many others, are realizing that she was lied to.
Right.
That if everyone vaccinated, once the vaccines were available, we'd be able to end the shutdowns, the masking would end. And it's just not true. That hasn't
Right.
panned out. And anyone with common sense could have seen that this wasn't going to pan out, that COVID wasn't going to go away, that living with COVID and the treatments that we
Right.
have for it was really the only path forward. These people live in a bubble, though, where they think that there was some magical world where if only, again, the unvaccinated would cooperate, they'd be able to get that, out of circulation, to remove that
Right.
risk from the population.
Well,
and it's just not true.
Yeah, she's like, how did we just get okay with COVID spreading? It's like, you don't really have a choice.
Right.
Viruses are going to spread whether you want them to or not.
You're either going to continue to live miserably in anxiety about COVID, or you're going to have to deal with it. Those are your two options.
And she has another screenshot of tweets
so let me bring that up.
Which just really speak to how people on the left, people like Bree Newsom-Bass, they're so out of touch. Like you said, they're in their own bubble, and they don't even realize how they live on the internet, yet they don't realize that the internet is traceable, and you can see how their opinions change or how their presentation of themselves changes on the internet, and how people can go back and see that. And it's not in this thread, but she says, shut the shit the F down and stop spreading the virus from person to person, like we should have done in March 2020, so we wouldn't still be dealing with this 2 years later. Folks are not understanding that we're just creating conditions for a vaccine resistant super variant, and vaccine resistant super variant. I won't say too much about that, but I don't think that's just coming from spreading. It's going to leave that there.
Yeah.
But it's funny that she said we should have just shut everything down in March 2020. But then she was calling for supporters of her movement to go out in the streets and tell the government how unhappy they were with their conditions, riot, loot, steal, burn things down, effectively create super spreader events, which people like her are so vehemently against. And yet she has the nerve a couple of days ago, when she's realized she's been duped and is pissed that she's been duped, to say, well, we should have just shut everything down. Bitch, why were you calling for people to go out and touch each other and run around and sweat and spit on each other and yell and do all of the stuff in June, July, August of 2020 if you didn't want all of this spreading around?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously it's a stark example of the classic hypocrisy, but
Right.
I will say, like, culturally too, one of my left-wing friends, we actually had a conversation about COVID at around this time. I think it was June of 2020. But he said, basically, he pointed out the obvious. He was like, yeah, I don't know if it's a good idea for these Black Lives Matter people to be protesting when there's a supposed pandemic going around. And it's like, he's a supporter of Black Lives Matter. Like, he broadly agrees with the message, but he also is consistent in his belief, at least was then, that COVID is a danger to public health. And so those two things, he's honest enough and he's logical enough to see the obvious problem there. But yeah, it's just like, even people on the left who are primed to follow people like this, or are primed to accept what people like Bree are saying, we're looking at those riots and those protests and saying, what are we doing here? Like, either COVID is serious or it's not. Right.
Well, and I think for a lot of people, it's just that they don't want to admit that they have this cognitive dissonance, or that the cognitive dissonance exists, because they feel like if they criticize Bree for one thing she says that they're going to be seen as criticizing the whole movement. And it's like, two things can be true at once. I don't agree with Black Lives Matter movement, but if you do, you can agree with the movement and still criticize things that they do. Yep. Two things can be true at the same time, and people are so worried about their image and how they're perceived, and they don't want to be canceled, they don't want to be blacklisted. Yeah. And so they just go along with it, and they support the cognitive dissonance, and they go, well, you know, we have this potentially deadly disease that we don't really know what is going to happen with it. But yeah, I mean, Black Lives Matter, they can go and have their protests that turn into fiery but peaceful things, you know, and it's like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, people like your friend, I think, are just so few and far between, because most people are too afraid to actually voice their opinions for, you know, fear of being exiled from their group that they've chosen to be a part of.
Yeah. Well,
which is a shame.
Yeah, and it's just that name Black Lives Matter is so loaded that any opposition to anything that they do is automatically opposition to Black people generally, and then that's a grave
white
sin.
Supremacist.
Well, hey, who are you calling a white supremacist?
You neo-Nazi.
You literally just used the term blacklisted, which in tech now is not acceptable.
What do they say?
You're not allowed to use the terms blacklisted or whitelisted anymore. They say allow list and deny list.
That's retarded. I'm just gonna say
no, this has been happening. I mean, I don't want to change the subject too drastically, but this has been happening in the tech world culturally. Yeah. You have all these white liberal techies who think that, well, blacklist automatically means Black people, and it's got a negative connotation. It's like, what are you talking about? So it's allow list.
I guess we have to get away from Black Friday then too, which has to do with the stock market, not Black people. But...
So we have allow list anyway. and deny list, and you know, we have GitHub, which is or Git rather, which is our version control, and there is a term in there called the master branch. And they had to get rid of master because that obviously in that context means white Southern slave owner. Right. And so they had to change it to the main branch. So, you know, this cultural madness, it stems from all these people, and it's obviously infecting every level of society. So perhaps we should take a look at this video here.
So this video came from Myth-Informed. On Rumble, they're Myth-Informed MKE because they're based in Milwaukee. Not a lot of people really pay attention to Myth-Informed, but they find all of these like woke trainings from different companies and different schools, and they really shed light on them and expose them. And they really don't, Myth-Informed really doesn't have a big enough following, in my opinion, because if we don't see these kind of trainings that are going on in companies, we're not really going to get to the depth of our cultural problems, right? And we're not going to be able to identify where all of this is stemming from. So this is one of the examples of a work training. I don't know what company it came from. They didn't say where it was from, but this is just one example.
So this is a work training in the private sector.
This is a private sector. It was probably a Zoom meeting, likely, because the way that it's presented is exactly how it would have been presented to the people. And so let's just go ahead and play this because it really speaks for itself.
Okay.
On critical race theory are centering whiteness. So we feel that we needed to talk a little bit about what whiteness is, at least in our understanding of it. Okay. And here, this slide is basically looking at whiteness as a disease. The social construct is false. There is no superiority of people of lighter skin. So it's important to see it as really it's a disease because it's an attack on the truth. Whiteness is not true in terms of what it imposes on us in our culture and our society. And then racism is a symptom of the disease of whiteness, really, and that's just saying kind of where it starts and where it leads to.
So let me just real quick. So the thing that stands out to me in that video, obviously there's a lot of nonsense there, but they're, again, like I said last episode, they're just making shit up. So they say the social construct is false, that lighter skinned people have superiority. It's like, wait, well, you're packing so many assumptions into that one statement. Right. First of all, I don't agree that there's even a social construct about whiteness. So, like, you are making that up out of whole cloth.
Or let alone that the social construct makes white people superior. Like,
right. You have literally brought the social construct into existence just by willpower and just by writing about it. Like it's not based in reality. So, but then they take that and treat it as if it's true, and then they say it's false. Like, what are you talking about? You made up something that you are asserting is true in our society, and then you're saying it's false, and then you're using that to justify the rest of your argument. It doesn't make any sense.
It really doesn't make sense, because it's like, what about it is false? Like, when you look at me, am I a ghost? Like, I am obviously white when you look at me.
Yeah.
So you're saying that my skin color is not true.
No,
it's
they're
false.
saying they're saying
What am I, pink?
They're
I don't
saying
know.
whiteness is it's hard to follow.
I
It's
know,
really hard.
it is hard to follow.
They're saying whiteness. So they're saying there is a social construct that is whiteness, and that means that people with lighter skin have superiority. But
Right.
there's like 3 different statements of fact made in that statement that are all
Well,
just made up.
Yeah, and they also say, like, what did he say? He said whiteness is a disease, but he said that like right after saying that whiteness is false.
That's
So
yeah.
it's like, how is it simultaneously false and also a disease? It's either a thing that's a problem, or it's not a thing at all, and we should just move on and ignore it. You can't have it be not a thing, it's not a cultural thing, it's not anything, but then it's also, you're twitching over there because you're like, your brain is short-circuiting. I know I said this video speaks for itself, but it actually doesn't. It doesn't say anything at all.
Yeah, it kind of says nothing. It really doesn't. I mean, part of me thinks that it's a troll to just like set us off.
Maybe. I mean, but he's so serious, and he's like, he made a slide about it. Like, it's obviously not a troll.
So whiteness is a social construct, or the idea that lighter skin is superior is a social construct that is false, and it's a white.
Should we watch it again?
Yeah, let's play it again. Let's see. Maybe
you can feel free to pause it at any point. That's
okay.
On critical race theory are centering whiteness. So we feel that we needed to talk a little bit about what whiteness is, at least in our understanding of it. Okay. And here,
so there you go. There's another red flag. Our understanding of it. That just means a bunch of academics who are not producing anything of value for society. They're just writing back and forth to each other and building more and more radical bullshit.
Well, and they say that, centering whiteness to be like society favors white people. And it just doesn't. Like, nothing about our society is structured to favor white people specifically. And rich people, but not white people.
Yeah, it's yeah. Okay, and anyway, continuing.
This slide is basically looking at whiteness as a disease. The social construct is false. There is no superiority of people with lighter skin.
So he's making an assertion that there is a social construct that people with lighter skin are superior, and then he's calling that false.
Right. In his made-up world, what he said was profound.
Yeah, so in their made-up world, they made up this idea that there is an idea of lighter skin being superior. They take that made-up idea of a made-up idea, elevate it, and then say it's false.
Right, well, so this man is the kind of person, I'm assuming he's a man, but he's the kind of person that will say that being white is not a culture, and then at the same time denounce whiteness.
That's a good point.
And it's like, you can't denounce something that doesn't exist. If being white is not a culture, if being European American is not a culture, then you can't say, well, this is just blatant whiteness. Like, that's not, you can't have them both.
Well, I think this is where this is probably where they get sleazy with their made up definitions. They probably say that, there's different definitions for white culture and whiteness, because, I've seen the word whiteness applied to people that are very obviously not white.
Yes.
Like, if you act like a white person or participate in the white culture, I guess, then that's
like
whiteness.
Asians now are considered white.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Harvard discriminates against Asians because that's fine, apparently.
Well, and like being on time is like a white thing.
Yes.
A white culture thing. Or sitting still is like a white thing.
Yeah.
Or being quiet
or being
is a white thing.
expected to write with proper grammar and spelling.
Or even speak with it. I mean.
Because what is our definition of proper? That comes from a white perspective.
Well, and you're just attacking people's lived experiences if you say that they can't speak a certain way. So.
Anyway, continuing.
So it's important to see it as really it's a disease because it's an attack on the truth.
And now he's claiming to know what the truth is. So
it really, so racism is a disease because it's an attack on the truth that the social construct is that lighter skin.
Wait, hold on. It's an attack. It's an attack on the truth. Wait a minute.
This is like a really shitty Rubik's Cube for your brain.
Riddle, I don't know. If whiteness is the truth and a social construct, then the falsification is what? And you're like, huh? So it's a disease.
Racism is a disease because of...
No, racism is not a disease. Racism is a symptom of the disease.
Oh, that's right.
Because it's an attack on the truth that lighter skinned people are superior. So again, he's assuming that he's making the assumption that people believe white people are superior, and that's the truth. So the truth that he's constructed himself is that white people are superior. So that is what he's referring to as the truth, is the white people are superior.
Okay.
So he's saying racism is a symptom of whiteness as a disease because people are attacking the truth that he's created. And so, like, the lashing out or reaction is to be racist.
That's some bullshit.
Yes. Do you understand, though?
No, but
okay. We'll move on. But
well, let's just play the rest of this.
Yeah.
This is not true in terms of what it imposes on us in our culture and our society. And then racism is a symptom of the disease of whiteness. Really, and that's just saying kind of where it starts and where it leads to.
So a whole lot of nothing.
I have no...
Saying where it starts and where it leads to is such a cop-out way of saying, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's just like, and this is... He started from a made-up truth, something that he and his academic buddies just made up.
Yes.
And then he built this whole theology on top of that.
Yeah.
Because it's a theology where there is no objective truth to any of this that he's saying. This is a left-wing analysis of the culture, which is totally off base.
Yeah.
It's totally wrong.
He said, come with me, if you will, into a land of fairy tales where the truth doesn't matter and we can make shit up.
I cannot believe. I just can't believe it.
I don't know if I want to go
Let's
there.
do it.
You want to go?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay. So I was going to say that he's talking about whiteness as a disease, but I just have to say, if you ever listen to like an actual white supremacist or neo-Nazi speak, it's bone chilling. Like a real one. Like people who shout white power and do a Zik Heil and shave their heads and wear swastikas on their bodies or tattoo them on their bodies. They're terrifying.
Yes.
I was just watching a docuseries called The Nostradamus Effect that the History Channel did in 2009. And they did an entire episode about like the rise of power of Hitler and how that relates to Nostradamus's quatrains and potentially Hitler being one of the antichrists. And they interviewed some neo-Nazis, and the whole time I was like, this is scary, because they said things like, we want to keep our blood pure and we are for white purification and, erasure of these other races. And I'm going, this man is terrifying. Because he said it with such a straight face. He goes, yeah, we all have copies of Mein Kampf. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, this is scary.
You hope that they're only LARPers, but... Right.
Well, and this was in 2009, before anybody and their mother could be called a white supremacist just because they don't like Biden. If you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Now you're a white supremacist all of a sudden. Or Larry Elder can be called the black face of white supremacy. It's like, the History Channel would never interview a neo-Nazi now.
No, not a real one.
Not a real one. These guys were friggin' scary, Yeah. And so there's one of the quatrains up there, starts with, or maybe it's down, this one here. It says, topography will soon be falsified. The urns and sepulchres stand violet. sex, swarm, and babbling sentiment, black put for white, and green fruit for the ripe. Now, if you don't know anything about Nostradamus' predictions, he had to write them in these very riddle-like ways, because at the time when he was doing his scrying, which is looking at a bowl of water and seeing prophecies, it would have been seen as heresy, and the church would have killed him real fast. And he wanted to keep doing this because he felt that it was profound. And people who study Nostradamus' writing are all very convinced that all of these things have either passed or will come to pass.
Did you say Nostradamus's?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Nostradamus.
I said his followers, so Nostradamus's followers.
No, never mind. I'm making fun of how you it sounded like you said Nostradamus.
Nostradamus. I'm still a little congested. It's like, what's the point you're trying to... Anyway, the black put for white really stuck out to me, but also the topography being falsified, because it says changing old landmarks, but if you think about it, people are tearing down statues, people are getting rid of pieces of art and putting up new statues in their place, and the black put for white is basically saying, like, everything that we know is going to be turned on its head. And so this really got me thinking about, are we headed to Armageddon? Are we headed to the rapture? Should we expect the next Antichrist in our lifetime? And it's kind of a thought experiment.
So is this supposedly supposed to be like the fourth one? I don't understand Nostradamus.
No, so this is just so he organizes them by centuries, which the centuries can be, I believe they can be equated to what's considered like the 7 seals that are talked about, or the 7 trumpets that are talked about in the book of Revelations.
Okay.
And so quatrain 4 would be like the 4th seal breaking, which is supposed to lead to the 5th seal, which is the 3rd Antichrist.
I see.
I was reading this, and I was also, watching the docuseries, obviously, and I just kept thinking, like, I think we're breaking the 4th seal right now, because it's a lot of violence, and it's a lot of, like, he predicts it's a lot of global turmoil, and there will be pandemics and economic strife and starvation and hunger. And we're starting to see food shortages because of the economy. And that's just not in America, that's worldwide. And we're starting to see, violence everywhere.
So this is obviously somewhat poetic, right?
It's very poetic, yes.
So here are my thoughts on this. So the explanatory paragraph, I believe that's what this is,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
It says that other maddened sophists usurping the office of religion. So we're already seeing that with the religion being placed with scientism. You could say woke ideologies acting in place of religion. There's definitely a gap in sort of the secular world. People need to latch on to something, and they've latched on to the wrong figures, false prophets, you could call them. They've latched on to the public health officials. They've latched on to academics, scientists. Every time I hear somebody say scientists say, I'm just like, get the fuck out of here. Like, I don't want to hear anything. Not to dismiss science, but it's like scientists are not special.
No.
They're not special.
No.
And guaranteed.
Most of them sit in a lab and remain unnamed.
Yeah. I mean, they do boring work, and they do work that society needs to be done. But just because they say something doesn't mean it's worth anything.
Right.
And so you have the replacement of religion happening.
Right.
Crude fruit be substituted for the ripe. I mean, this is what we see at the highest levels of our government and our institutions. Like the crude fruit is the one running the show. The ripe fruit would be people that are actually meritocratic. They have the ability to run the office. They have the ability to actually do the right things in their governing power. Yeah. But we don't have that. We have this cronyism. We have people like Dr. Fauci who are not good doctors. They're good at being bureaucrats.
Right.
And we have military leadership that's an absolute embarrassment and failure. Can't even withdraw from a barbarian hellhole without getting a bunch of soldiers killed. So it's like...
well, I also interpreted the green fruit for the ripe, or, crude fruit be substituted for the ripe. I kind of saw that as like the bastardization of motherhood. and of bearing children, but also as it relates to transgenderism, right? Because if you're a man who becomes a woman, you can't give birth. You can't have ripe fruit. The fruit of your womb. You can't.
That's true.
That's not possible. And you're also telling women to kill their children, which is like that fruit will never become ripe. It will always be green. And so you could interpret it that way, or you could just interpret it as characters.
Yeah. Well, I guess you could take that a level.
Character souring.
You could take that a level higher, because that is I would say that you're right about all that, but that's a symptom of the crude fruit being substituted for the ripe at a layer above. The idea that society has become so perverted that moral virtue and righteousness has been totally replaced from being that ripe fruit to this crude green fruit. It's just like it's a total corruption of the value system. It's a total corruption of leadership, and it's just a total corruption of moral values all the way down the tree. And this is why, in any sane world, no doctor in their right mind would do like a trans affirmation surgery on somebody who's less than 18.
Right.
Probably shouldn't even do it on somebody that's less than like 30 or something. But, but it's like the collapse of the moral values all the way down from the top all the way to the bottom has just led to...
It's just sour. It's just... Yeah. It's completely soured. You can also, it can point to the infantilization of young adults. It can point... This quatrain is just so profound and so beautifully put that you could spend months on this quatrain alone, and he wrote hundreds of them. Yeah. And I was thinking about that because, yes, everybody that has ever read Nostradamus from the time of his writings to now has always tried to equate it to the time that they live. And that speaks to the arrogance of human. You always want to assume that you're like hot shit or whatever, and, he was talking about your time or whatever. But it is worth thinking about, because what if we are headed to the end of the days and we don't even know it?
Well, that to me is like, obviously there's a whole potential for bias in here. You can basically read into that whatever you want. But that, in a lot of ways, I think that's the point of art and poetry, is that it's supposed to evoke emotion from within you. Like maybe a baser emotion, or maybe it's, if you feel something when you read a poem, that's a signal that there's something in your psyche that's bothering you or needs to be addressed. And so the fact that humans are imperfect and you can read this at any time and get some value out of it, something that's wrong with your society or whatever. I think that's, a feature of poetry, not a bug.
Well, and it's kind of like, are Nostradamus's writings prophecy, or are they just speaking to what you said, which is just the baser realities of being a human? Yeah. Like, did he just observe something that none of us could observe, and maybe he was always in a highly meditative state that allowed him to see these things and make these observations and write them down, but the church would have seen it as heresy, so he wrote them in this very fruitful language.
Well, I think
it's just more observational than prophetic.
Yeah, if you understand human nature well enough, then what you say about it could be interpreted as prophecy when it happens.
Well, and even so, some people who have interpreted these writings say that Napoleon was the first Antichrist and Hitler was the second Antichrist. And I feel like if you're talking about the whole span of human existence, those two figures were very close together. And if there's only going to be 3 Antichrists, I feel like they would be much farther apart than that. They would have to spread across millennia, probably, since humans have been around for a very long time and will probably continue to be around for a very long time. And so I think it just speaks to the folly of humans and how people love to like decipher things and whatever. But it's kind of a fun thought experiment to think about, are we headed to the end days?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the one more thing I'll say about this is like the fear of the end days it's always present throughout history. Yeah. But that might just be a feature of humanity too, because if you don't fear for the future, then what is going to be the motivating factor to make proper changes in the present, right? So.
Well, and I was also thinking about that that concept too, and being fearful of the end and how it relates to people who wear masks and who are vaccinated and everything. And I think that it speaks to, like, I would wager that anybody who is wearing a mask in their car, who is triple vaccinated,
soon to be quadruple vaccinated,
doesn't believe in a higher power.
Yeah.
They don't believe that anything's got their back. They don't believe God has a plan for them. They don't believe that everything happens for a reason. They're so focused on their mortality and they're so focused on the material that they feel they need to do these things to preserve what they have in the material, because they don't believe that there is anything waiting for them when they die.
Right.
And they don't believe that they will be safe if they put their trust in a God or a deity or the universe or whatever. I would wager that all of those people don't have that belief, and so they have to cling to something, and it is their own mortality.
Well, this and this ties back to the conversation we were having earlier about belief and acting it out. You know, there's probably, I think you're right largely, but I think if you were to just straight up ask people, hey, do you believe in a higher power? Most of them would say yes, but that's just a flippant comment. You know, like it goes back to, your belief is what you act out.
Right.
And if you're not acting as if there's a higher power, if you're not acting as if you actually believe and have faith in your own ability to rationalize and reason about data, if you're doing the behaviors that you're talking about, you keep getting boosted, you keep wearing your mask no matter where you go, you're not attending gatherings because you're deathly scared. You are putting all of your belief in that your mortality is it. That's the only thing that matters. But also you're putting all of your belief and faith in the people that are constantly misleading you about it. Right. So that person may say, yeah, I believe in God, but they act like they're worshiping a different God.
Well, they say they believe in God, but do they trust in God? Because I think those are two different things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm making this distinction between just simply saying it is not enough.
Right. Well, yeah. I don't know. I think the people who aren't vaccinated, who don't wear masks, they don't have the same fear of death because they do have something bigger than them to put all of that fear into. And these other people who maybe don't believe in a God or say they believe in God but don't act it out have that fear because they aren't actually putting that fear anywhere else. And I just think it all ties together. So
yeah, interesting thoughts. So do you have something, or do you want to get into this fun cultural story here?
Oh, we can do this.
So this is a tweet, cultural story from the New York Post. Woman claims she was virtually groped in Meta VR platform Metaverse. So again, this is not really an article that we need to read because it's pretty self-explanatory. This woman is basically hysterical. I guess you're not supposed to say that. That's a misogynistic term to use in the context of a woman. I think so. I don't know. I thought saying hysterical for a woman was
I think that came from the time of witches.
Well, in any case, this woman is being hysterical, and essentially a computer avatar got into her personal space and started doing some inappropriate gestures around her and to her avatar. and she is claiming that this is no different than actual sexual assault.
Yeah, but you know what this makes me think of?
What does it make you think of?
When every 11-year-old on planet Earth teabags each other in Call of Duty. What, are we going to say that that's groping too? Like you're playing your game and your buddy groped you because he decided to teabag over your dead body? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
and I will pull up the article because there's an absolutely ridiculous line in here.
Yeah.
And the line is this. Sexual harassment in virtual reality is sexual harassment in real life. Full stop. Experts have said. So
which experts? Name them, please.
This is, first of all, expert means nothing. We've already gone over this. Second of all, you're just going to put that sentence in there. I mean, maybe they go over it, but it's like sexual harassment in virtual reality is sexual harassment in real life. Full stop. Experts have said. You can take off the headset.
That's what I was going to ask, like, as soon as it started happening, why didn't she log off? Why did she stay and go, stop what you're doing? Why didn't she just take the damn thing off?
Because she wanted to go to a news outlet and say, I was groped in virtual reality. It's just, these people are ridiculous. Like, you should see some of the things that go on in online games. This woman would die.
Well, okay, so here's a big problem, right? Like, they're trying to Well, they're not trying. They are marketing this metaverse to just anybody who can afford a VR set, right? It's like the difference between that and like people who game. If you're in the gaming world, you understand that it is a vile place. Like, weird shit is said, weird things happen. People kind of let things go. I mean, I think it's still like that. I know that when Call of Duty was really popular, people would say the N-word. They would call you, your mother's a whore and all that stuff. And it was just the way the game was played. And it was kind of part of the fun because you didn't know what crazy jackwagon you were going to get in your party or whatever. Yeah. And these are just regular middle-aged people, presumably, who are going in this virtual reality. They've never spent a time playing a video game. They've never spent any time in a virtual reality type situation. And they think that this behavior is unusual for the Wild West internet. It's like, that's not unusual. And it's not unusual in video games. And if you don't have a thick skin, don't play video games.
Yeah.
Don't go into virtual reality because it's not for the faint of heart.
That's essentially it. Also, it's like, it's very confusing. What if you're a woman in real life, but you decide that your avatar is going to be a man, and then somebody comes and gropes you? Does that work? Like, how? So your male avatar could be...
But you can't even feel it. Like, you see it happening to your avatar, but it's not like you have sensors on your body where it's like, I felt him touching me.
Yeah, but it's like
here.
if this were to be treated seriously, which it shouldn't.
No.
What are you gonna like? You're a woman, you have a male avatar. He groped my breasts. Like, what? There are none on the avatar. How does the other person even know you're a woman? Is it if the person fondles your virtual junk, does that translate to sexual assault if you're a woman? I don't understand.
But also, if your avatar's back is turned to the person groping you, you wouldn't even notice until you turned your ass around. And
That's true.
Looked at him.
Yeah, you literally have no way of knowing.
No, unless you turned your happy ass around.
Also,
you're not going to know. And so she would have had to have been sitting there facing the other avatar, watching it happen, and then been like, I was groped. Instead of just being like, hey, you're an asshole, and I'm getting out of here.
This sounds like victim blaming, honestly.
Well, you blame... Are avatars victims? Can you victim blame a fictional cartoon?
No, I don't... It's just so ridiculous.
It's a lot of gray area.
So I want to move on real quick to this next cultural story. So Dungeons...
Well, kind of on par.
It's the same level of retardation.
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons Wizards of the Coast, which is the publisher, removes problematic lore. So there's problematic lore in Dungeons and Dragons. Shall we find out why?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, so one passage in the article says, Wizards of the Coast is making a variety of changes to its Dungeons and Dragons books with the intent to remove lore deemed to be problematic. It goes on to say that these aren't the first changes. The Dungeons and Dragons publishers have been removing lore that enforces or has the potential to enforce negative racial stereotypes. So... already this is stupid.
I don't know. So if you don't know anything about Dungeons and Dragons, the races are made up.
Yeah. There
are humans, but then the rest of the races, it's like human. It's not even based on skin color. It's more like species than races, but it's like you're human or you're a fictional creature.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's so stupid I can barely read it.
It's probably the least racist game ever.
These stereotypes can be traced back to the roots of D&D with greedy dwarves, violent orcs, and evil dark elves. Any generalization about an entire race of people has the potential to be problematic. These aren't real. They're not real.
But also, if you're drawing comparisons between races of real humans and these made up species, that's a problem with you.
Yeah.
Not a problem with the lore.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, dark elves doesn't mean black elves. It means they're evil. Like they are dark magic practitioners.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't have anything to do with their skin. That's like the only thing I could think of is people hear dark elves and they think it's like a Nubian elf or something.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the magic that they wield.
Yeah, and they live underground.
Do they?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh.
I don't know in the D&D, I think.
I don't know.
But anyway, so yeah, obviously these aren't real races, but also it's like, what? If you're going to have a bunch of fantasy races in your game, elves and dwarves and whatnot, is the idea just to make them all homogenous except for their appearance? Like,
guess so.
what's the point of having orcs if they're just going to be tall dwarves?
Yeah.
And humans are just going to be like in between that
Right.
height. Like,
Yeah.
the point of having the races is that they have different racial passive bonuses. Are we going to get rid of those
Yeah,
next?
exactly.
Like, because you're
There's-
saying one race is better than the other?
There's
It's like,
different benefits and detriments to each race that you pick, and you have to pick that based on what you're aiming to accomplish in the campaign that you're participating in. So,
yeah. But also, I think they may be doing just a broad cultural disservice. They think that they're doing a service by removing anything that could be interpreted to be problematic, which is just ridiculous to begin with. But let's say that they do put blatant racism in their game between these fictional races.
Yeah.
Isn't that a good opportunity, since this is an active game, D&D is a tabletop game that
Right.
you play with friends? Isn't that a good excuse to, through storytelling, show how racial animosity can be detrimental and terrible,
Yeah.
and through the story of a campaign show, people, the characters getting over their racial differences?
Right.
Like, isn't that a good fictional environment to show the horrors of racism, and then to work through like a campaign or a quest,
Right.
healing at least some of that? Like, isn't that,
well, because you see that there are benefits to each of the races,
yeah,
and you use the strengths of each race to help you achieve a common goal.
right,
That's like a very good moral lesson.
right,
Is like you aim to find the strengths in every person, every individual that you meet, and you bring your strengths to them, and together you take your strengths and support each other in a common goal. Like that's
Right.
a great message.
yeah,
And yeah, they think, and also the Dungeons and Dragons is a game that kind of came about for people who felt socially dispossessed.
Yeah.
Like they were the nerds, they were the geeks, they didn't have anywhere to go. And so it didn't matter what your race was. If you were a geek, you hung out with the geeks and you played this game together, and it was always a common goal, and you didn't think about your physical race. You only thought about your character's race and what you needed to do in the campaign. And so now you're saying that you want to take away these racial stereotypes that don't even exist in the lore, and you're going to create a new problem with these socially dispossessed people, because they're going, oh shit, am I a racist now because I've been playing this game?
Right.
And they're already socially inept and they're impaired. I mean, not everybody who plays Dungeons and Dragons, obviously, but
right,
the main draw of this is it's somewhere you can go to escape all of these things that you have problems addressing in real life. And now you're saying, oh no, it is in this game too. It's like, if you don't know how to address racism in real life, and now you're saying that your favorite game is also racist, you're going to go, shit, I don't know what to do. You're
Yeah.
going to get awkward and weird again, and you're not going to have anywhere to go to
And-
work it out.
yeah, and that's a good point. And to just further drive all of what we've been saying home, so they removed problematic lore, not even from a humanoid race. They removed problematic lore from a beholder, which is a giant eyeball with tentacles. And
His noodly appendages
the
is
thing is-
displeased.
these things are inherently bad. They are inherently evil, and
Yeah.
their lore describes them as such. I won't read this whole thing, but their lore is basically like, oh, they want to be the top. They want to be supreme. The beholders are manipulative, and they just seek to be, the masters of their environment, of their universe or whatever. And that is the context around why they're not good beings,
Yeah.
because they want all of the wrong things. And so I just think it's ridiculous. Like, you can't even read a person into this. This is a
Yeah,
this
who
is
are they trying to say? Are they trying to make the connection that it's to white people or something?
well, it's just the beholder thinks that it's racially supreme, but it's an eyeball with tentacles, and so it's like, it's a disgusting creature.
So it's an octopus?
Yeah, it's a
basically.
disgusting creature
Yeah.
that
okay.
has terrible opinions about itself, and they're going to remove that. And I'm speechless, but it's and,
It just doesn't make sense.
and furthermore, they're just removing all of the spiciness about anything.
Yeah.
All this, removing problematic stuff from art and culture is just, you're just making everything more bland.
Yeah, they want everything even keeled. They want everything milk toast, and they want you to be so, what do you call it? So sedated by everything in our culture. Like everything that is put out now, every new product, every new show, every new video game, it's meant it's meant to keep you sedated and not thinking of anything. And in doing so, everything can be bland and you can get away with it because you're not of sound mind. You're not even experiencing life if you're sedated. And that's just kind of the whole thing. And I mean, yeah, so keeping right along with this ridiculous woke train where woke doesn't need to be. This is an article from UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, and their news site. And the title says, renowned Egyptologist says it's time to stop romanticizing ancient Egypt. You know how you do.
Yep, how one does.
And Allison Hewitt is the one who wrote this article about Kara Cooney, who is the Egyptologist, who has written many books about Egyptology. And in her latest one, she basically denounces her ever having appreciated ancient Egypt. She says that, that first paragraph there, she says, the uncritical admiration of the pharaohs that has continued to the present day is a legacy of the ancient rulers' efforts to manipulate how they were perceived, and has even served as a narrative and cultural foundation propping up modern authoritarianism. So basically she said that kings were authoritarians. Yes.
Wow, another
Very
zinger,
insightful.
another
Yes.
zinger from the academics.
And she said that we shouldn't be romanticizing the ancient worlds because they were always patriarchal and imbued with misogyny.
Yeah.
Yes, they were patriarchal, but I don't think we know enough about the ancient worlds to say distinctively if they were misogynistic or not. Just because the rulers were men doesn't mean they were inherently misogynistic societies. And I don't think we've uncovered enough about the ancient world to really make that connection. I think it's just another professor, another academic trying to go woke.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, this is a big brain take from academics, but it's it just goes to show the pitfalls of reading into the past what we expect from the modern world,
Right.
because you have you had children dying and women dying in childbirth all the time. You didn't have any sort of birth control or contraception, so
Right.
obviously in a world like that where disease is prevalent, children are dying at a young age, women, childbirth is inherently dangerous for a lot of women.
Right.
There's going to be different expectations between the men and the women. And no one ever seems to talk about, like, okay, maybe women weren't treated as well as they are in the modern day. Okay, that makes sense to an extent because of the unique position that women had back in
Right.
time. But we don't treat modern men the same as we did back then either. I mean,
Yeah.
modern men they were slaves. They were sent off to wars that were wars of conquest and greed and all this stuff. And,
Yeah.
only one man got to be the king. Only one man
Right.
got to be the pharaoh. Everyone else was doing backbreaking labor. So it's like we're reading our expectations about humanity in our current cultural
Right.
and technological context, and we're using that to retroactively judge how ancient societies structure themselves. And
Right.
it's just like, the Egyptians obviously still accomplished great things despite, whatever you perceive to be their cultural deficiencies. But then I can just flip it on you. It's like, why are you with your white skin trying to criticize a brown culture from
Right.
the past?
Well, and yeah, and it just seems like she's just trying to criticize for the sake of criticizing. Why can't you appreciate what once was, and why can't you appreciate it in its historical context?
Yeah.
Like, you can appreciate how things have changed while appreciating the ancient worlds. And she claims that we're romanticizing it, but I fail to see how. And in this paragraph down here, it says pharaohs opened themselves up to social justice discussions. That you just want to be woke. I mean,
Yeah.
concepts of patriarchal society, extraction of natural resources for profit, exploitation, overwork, misogyny, and more all came pouring out of the Egyptian narrative. By exploitation, do you mean slavery? That we're not supposed to talk about because slavery didn't exist until the Americas?
In the modern definition of exploitation, that just might mean somebody who's working a job.
Right. Heaven forbid you have a job with benefits and a decent paycheck. You're exploited.
Yeah, heaven forbid there's a capitalist overlord that is paying me a yearly salary for my time.
Right. Well, and it's like extraction of natural resources for profit. I'm sorry, what else are you supposed to do with natural resources?
Give
them away?
Yeah.
No, you're going to make a profit.
That's literally human history.
Yeah, right. Well, and that's what they're saying. It's all came pouring out of the Egyptian narrative. That's not Egyptian narrative. That's just the way that the world has turned forever. That's always
people.
Will. People are greedy by nature. People want to provide for themselves. They want power. That's how it's always been. So yeah, you're going to have a patriarchal society anytime that you have a kingdom where a man rules as a king. It's going to be inherently patriarchal because he is like the father of his people, essentially. Mm-hmm. And yeah, he's going to try to make money for his people.
Also, weren't there a few Egyptian queens?
Oh, you mean like
Nefertiti,
Cleopatra?
Yeah, I don't think.
Who was the pharaoh that was a woman but she hid that she was a woman? Was that Nefertiti?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. First trans pharaoh?
No, she was definitely a woman.
First trans pharaoh.
Sure.
I need those brownie points. First trans pharaoh. You cannot.
You can't say brownie points.
Oh no. But yeah,
it's just another ridiculous display of some academic trying to say, look at me, I'm so woke, and I can explain how I'm so woke in my respective field. And I used to praise Egyptology, and now I'm going to denounce it just because it'll win me some social credit points.
This article is literally a perfect example of why I have so much disdain for the academic class. Yeah. They are just putting garbage into the world.
Right.
Garbage. There's nothing insightful in this article.
Well, it's like, why can't you just study ancient Egypt and do archaeological digs and be happy with that and discover something new that we haven't found before in ancient Egypt and be happy with that as your career? Why do you have to put in your politics? Why do you have to put in your opinion? Oh, maybe because you haven't accomplished anything as far as uncovering anything about ancient Egypt. And so the only way you're going to leave a legacy is if you go woke and appeal to the woke mob.
Yeah. How about we kick this person out of her position and get somebody in there that actually has an appreciation and interest in actual Egyptian,
because what's next? Is she going to burn a sarcophagus?
All right. Let's talk about some political stories real quick.
Sure.
So we got the Kamala Harris approval ratings here.
Yes.
So you want to set this up here?
Yeah. So the LA Times recently published, I believe like a week ago, Kamala Harris's latest approval polls, and it is bad. It's bad. Like, she is, her unfavorable ratings are higher than her favorable ratings in pretty much every way you can slice it and dice it. No demographic at all approves of her as a majority. It's pretty awful. Under 30, so that would be us, 53% unfavorable. And then it's 56 unfavorable for...
Over 50% in every age group.
For the millennials, which is 30 to 44. Millennials and Gen Xers. And then 45 to 64 is 51%. And 65 plus is 52%.
No, the interesting thing here is that age 65 up is 46% favorable. 47% for 45 to 64. That's interesting.
I mean, it is interesting, but still her unfavorable percentage is still higher. I mean, it's closer to being 50-50, but the fact that across the board... except for post-grad.
No. So by education. Every education group has over 50% unfavorable rating, with the exception of post-grads who have a 53% favorable.
Right. And then by party, too.
By party, of course, you're going to expect the Democrats to view her favorably, but 62% unfavorable with independents.
That is the biggest one. That was the stat that actually struck me the most, because by age group, okay, by party, obviously Democrats are going to be really high, but if independents are that high of a percentage unfavorable for Kamala Harris, that does not look good. You
No.
you always want to have the independents favor you, because obviously your opposite party is never going to favor you. But if the independents don't favor you, that's bad news. And then
Yeah.
this is comparing to other former vice presidents.
Yeah.
And she is much lower than everybody except for
Wow.
Mike Pence. I mean, she is lower than Mike Pence by negative 6.6 points on the same day as when he was in his vice presidency, but everyone else is much more drastic.
Yeah. Yeah. 18 points for Joe Biden, and then over 40 points compared to both Al Gore and Dick Cheney at the same points in their vice presidency.
And I just want to point out about Dick Cheney, this was after he had shot a man in the face too. So that says a lot about
But this also
how
appears
poorly she's doing.
This also appears to be, well, I guess not super shortly after 9/11.
No, because it would have been in the same month that they did this
Yeah.
for her. So
Okay.
it would have been right after 9/11.
Yeah, so I mean, the Democrats are obviously looking very bad for the midterms. I mean, obviously Kamala is very unliked, disliked throughout the nation, but it leaves the question of who is going to be running for the president on the Democrat side in 2024, because the thing is, like, we obviously have the Republican candidates. It's either going to be Trump or it's going to be DeSantis.
Yeah.
Anyone else is like, don't even bother running.
I think Kristi Noem will try.
No,
I think she's gonna. She's
saying-
gonna try in the primaries, but she's gonna get.
No, don't even
the
try.
The floor's gonna get wiped with her.
If you're a Republican,
But-
you do not even try if you're running against Trump or DeSantis.
Right.
There's no reason to. But you can't
gonna be
say
a
that there's a
bloodbath.
strong candidate. There's no obvious candidate for the Democrats. There is none.
No, I mean,
would-
some people are pushing Pete Buttigieg, but he doesn't have any experience. He's failing as transportation
Right.
secretary.
Well, I'm not even talking about experience. I'm
but-
talking about who is the obvious person to run. There is no answer.
There isn't.
There is no answer.
I mean, right now they're saying Joe Biden's going to run again, but I don't think he's going to make it.
I don't think so either. And so this is just tying into the political process too. So you have this. So at the Take Your Medicine podcast Twitter account, which is at Take Your Med Pod, the username couldn't be that long, so I had to abbreviate
that's
it.
okay.
So Twitter at Take Your Med Pod, and Telegram, same deal, at Take Your Med Pod.
I think it's Take Your Meds Pod, though, on Telegram, because it let me have
An extra character.
all those characters.
Why didn't you just write out Take Your Medicine then? Anyway, you can
Yeah.
find it on Telegram.
Yes, follow
Take
us.
Your Med Pod.
Join
Follow
our
us there.
channel.
But so I responded to this tweet. So this tweet for the listeners is this is from Jennifer, quote, pro voting, end quote, Rubin. She put her own nickname in her
That's so
in her title.
cringe.
And she says, if Manchin is no on both BBB, Build Back Better, and voting, Biden is done. Democracy is hanging by a thread. Hard to think of anything more destructive. And so obviously I quote tweeted this, and I said, in quotes, if 51 senators oppose President Joe Biden, then democracy is being destroyed, end quotes, dash, Jennifer, quote, brainless ghoul, Rubin.
I know everyone keeps saying, well, it's one senator that prevented us from passing this. No. It's 51 senators. This is democracy in action. Just because you don't like the results doesn't mean you get to go and throw a hissy fit and say democracy is crumbling.
Right.
You just don't like that democracy wasn't in your favor this time.
Yeah.
Because as soon as they win something or they pass something, they go, democracy's working. Look at it go. And it's like, no, listen.
Yeah, they inherently hate anything democratic if it opposes their agenda. So
I
it's
like
just
that she put BBB. I'm like, what? Big black babes?
okay, all right. All right, well,
Anyway.
that's going to wrap it up for the show.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad we ended on this because Manchin not voting for BBB is actually a white pill, I would say.
Yeah, it is a white pill, but you know, if I'm going to read into this tweet, a black pill for me is the fact that the left wing continues to basically say that democracy is being destroyed if it works in a way that they don't like. So,
Yeah.
Manchin,
They're
kudos to
children.
him for standing up to his party.
Yes.
That is a white pill. But this
Yes.
attitude persisting is making me feel very uneasy about future efforts.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I don't have anything else on that. Anyway, these have been your pills for cultural ills, and my name is Sadie again.
And my name is Jacob. Thanks for listening. Follow us on Telegram and Twitter at TakeYourMedPod. Might be different for Telegram. You can follow us on YouTube. That's Take Your Medicine. Rumble, same deal. We're also on Odyssey and on all of the major podcast platforms.
Yes.
All right. Thanks for listening and watching.